When my daughter-in-law looked at me that morning and said, "You're not needed here anymore," I didn't say a word. I just smiled, not because it didn't hurt, but because I had no tears left to give. I remember standing there in the kitchen, my hands still wet from washing the breakfast dishes. The tea kettle was still warm, and the smell of fresh parathas filled the room. The same breakfast I had made every day for my son since he was a child. She stood near the doorway, her arms folded, her voice steady but cold. Not cruel, just tired, as if she had been waiting to say those words for a long time. "You've done enough, Mama," she said softly. "We can manage now." Those words, "we can manage now." They sound harmless to most people. But to a mother who has given everything, they sound like a goodbye. I looked around the house, my son's house. The one I helped build when he was still trying to find his footing in life. Every corner had a piece of me in it. The curtains I sewed with my own hands. The plants I watered each morning. Even the framed photo of him as a little boy. The one smiling in his school uniform. Front teeth missing, eyes full of dreams. My heart whispered, so this is what it feels like, to no longer be needed. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. Sometimes silence is the only dignity left to a mother. I dried my hands with the edge of my shawl, poured the rest of the tea into a cup, and sat down for a moment longer, just to feel the home around me one last time. Through the window, I could see the rain falling softly, blurring the view of the street outside. It felt fitting, as if the world itself didn't want me to see too clearly. The moment my life had quietly changed. I thought of my son, my sweet boy. The one who used to hold my hand while crossing the road. Who once promised he'd never let me feel alone. Now his world had grown beyond me, and I had to let him go, even if it meant losing a part of myself. So I smiled. The family photo that once sat proudly on the shelf, the one of Arjun and me when he graduated, was moved into a drawer to make space for new decor. I didn't say anything. After all, it was their home now too. But each change felt like a quiet erasure. As if little by little, my presence was being folded away like an old photograph. One afternoon, I overheard Priya talking to a friend on the phone. Her voice was soft, but the words stayed with me. "It's hard sometimes. She's always around. I can't really relax." I froze where I stood. She wasn't cruel, she sounded tired, maybe even frustrated. But her words cut deeper than she could ever know. I wanted to walk away quietly, but my feet wouldn't move. For the first time, I realized that my love, my care, my habits might feel like a burden to her. That night, I sat by my window and looked out at the city lights. They sparkled like 1,000 tiny memories, each one bright, each one out of reach. I whispered to myself, maybe I've stayed too long. Maybe love also needs space. But still, I stayed. Because mothers don't just walk away. We wait. We hope. One Sunday morning, Arjun asked me if I wanted to go with them to visit Priya's parents. I smiled, happy to be included. But just as I started getting ready, Priya came into my room. Her tone was gentle, but her words carried something I couldn't quite name. "Ma," she said softly, "it's been a while since we've spent time with my parents alone. I hope you don't mind sitting this one out. Next time, you'll come with us." I nodded again. I always nodded. When the door closed behind them, the quiet felt heavier than usual. I walked into the kitchen and saw the teacups still on the counter. So I washed them, slowly, carefully. Not because they needed cleaning, but because I needed something to hold on to. Weeks passed, and I began noticing things I hadn't before. They had their own little world now, their routines, their inside jokes, their shared silence. I didn't know it then. But those small silences, those little distances, were the first signs of something I wasn't ready to face. A storm was quietly building. And one day, it would come in the form of 7 simple words. "You're not needed here anymore, Ma." Time has a strange way of changing things, not suddenly, but softly, like how a flower wilts petal by petal. That's how our home began to change. At first, it was just the routine that shifted. Arjun started leaving earlier for work. He used to drink tea with me before heading out. We'd sit quietly by the window, watching the world wake up together. But now, he would grab his bag in a rush. Sometimes, he'd leave with only a quick "bye, Ma," while checking his phone. Priya's mornings were filled with calls and meetings. She had started working from home. I tried to stay out of her way. I would make breakfast, keep things ready, and then disappear into my small corner near the living room. It wasn't that anyone said anything harsh, no cruel words, no raised voices. It was the silence that hurt the most. Silence that sat between us at the dinner table like an uninvited guest. One evening, I made Arjun's favorite dish, lentils with fried onions, just the way he liked since childhood. When he came home, I smiled and said, "Your favorite tonight." He smiled politely, but before he could even sit, Priya said, "Oh, Arjun, remember? We ordered dinner already, sushi from that new place." He hesitated, looked at me, and said softly, "Next time, Ma. Promise." I nodded. But when they sat together on the couch, laughing over something on the TV, I quietly covered the food and kept it aside. That night, I ate a few bites alone. It wasn't the food that hurt, it was the feeling that my love was no longer needed. Days turned into weeks. Priya began changing things around the house, small things at first. The curtains I had stitched by hand were replaced with modern blinds. Who would love him the way I always did, with care, patience, and warmth? When they invited me to their wedding, I packed the one silk saree I had kept for special occasions. I still remember how Arjun looked that day. So tall, so proud, his eyes full of joy. And Priya, she was beautiful. Soft-spoken, graceful, respectful. The kind of daughter-in-law I thought I could love like my own. After the ceremony, when everyone was laughing and taking pictures, she came to me, touched my feet, and said, "Ma, from now on, you're my mother too." And I believed her. In that moment, I felt my family had grown. That I had gained a daughter, not lost a son. A year later, they moved into a bigger house in the city. Arjun called and said, "Ma, it's time for you to come stay with us. You've done enough alone. Let us take care of you now." My heart filled with joy. For so long, I had dreamed of living with him again. Of cooking his favorite meals. Telling bedtime stories to the children they'd one day have. And feeling the warmth of a family under one roof. The first few weeks were wonderful. Priya and I cooked together. She would ask me for recipes. "How do you make your dal so thick, Ma?" And I'd laugh, teaching her small tricks I had learned over the years. Arjun came home from work tired. But he always made time to sit with us. His head resting on my lap as we watched the evening news together. It felt like life had finally come full circle. The struggles, the loneliness, the waiting all leading to this peace. But sometimes, peace fades so quietly. You don't even notice when it starts slipping away. It began with small things. A forgotten good morning. A quiet dinner without conversation. A subtle change in tone. Priya stopped asking me to cook as often. She said she wanted to try new recipes from the internet. I didn't mind, after all, times change. But slowly, I started feeling like a guest in my own son's home. When I would fold Arjun's clothes, she would. Because sometimes, when your heart is breaking before all this, before the silence, before the distance. There was a time when my home was filled with laughter. I still remember those mornings when my son, Arjun, was just a little boy. He used to run barefoot through the courtyard, chasing the sunlight. His tiny feet leaving dusty prints on the floor I had just cleaned. And every time I pretended to be angry, he would look up with those big brown eyes and say, "Sorry, Ma," and hug my legs before running off again. I lost my husband when Arjun was only 6. A heart attack, sudden, cruel, and quiet. I still remember the sound of the doctor's voice. Soft but final, as if he were closing the door on our old life. From that day on, I became both mother and father. Every decision, every worry, every hope, it all rested on me. There were nights I would sit up, sewing clothes for neighbors, just to afford his school fees. Some months, I'd eat less so that he could have an extra egg or a glass of milk. But I never thought of it as sacrifice. To me, it was love made visible. Arjun grew up watching me work hard. And I could see he carried that fire inside him. He studied late into the night. His books spread across the small wooden table that had once been his father's. Sometimes I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and there he'd be, eyes drooping but determined, whispering formulas under his breath. I would smile quietly from the doorway, thinking, this boy will make something of himself one day. And he did. He earned a scholarship, got a good job in the city, and slowly built a life of his own. The first time he called me from his office, he said, "Ma, I did it. I got the job." I remember crying, not from sadness, but from relief. Every sleepless night, every tear I had swallowed. It all felt worth it in that moment years later, when he told me he had met someone. A kind, educated girl named Priya. I was happy. Truly happy. Because I had prayed that he'd find someone.